The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Windsor Castle, as Prince William stood quietly in his study, staring out at the gardens his grandmother had loved so dearly. Kate entered the room softly, her footsteps barely audible on the thick carpet. She could see the weight of responsibility settling on her husband's shoulders like a heavy cloak. "The children are asking questions again," Kate said gently, placing a warm cup of tea beside him on the mahogany desk. "Charlotte wants to know why we look so sad lately." William turned from the window, his eyes reflecting a mixture of grief and determination. The past few months had been the most challenging of their lives together. The royal family was facing changes that would reshape everything they had known. The Queen's health had been declining steadily, and with each passing day, the reality of their future roles became more apparent. "What do we tell them?" William asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How do we explain that their world is about to change forever?" Kate moved closer to her husband, taking his hand in hers. She had always been his anchor, the steady presence that kept him grounded when the pressures of royal life threatened to overwhelm him. "We tell them the truth, but gently. We help them understand that saying goodbye doesn't mean forgetting the love we've shared." The couple had spent countless hours in recent weeks preparing for this moment. They had discussed their fears, their hopes, and their responsibilities to both their family and their country. The weight of centuries of tradition rested on their shoulders, yet they were determined to face whatever came with grace and dignity. Outside, the ground staff continued their daily routines, tending to the roses that had bloomed magnificently this summer. Life continued its steady rhythm, even as the family prepared for one of the most difficult farewells in recent royal history. William and Kate knew that their response to this challenge would set the tone for their future, reign and influence how their children would remember this pivotal moment in their family's story. The telephone rang, interrupting their quiet conversation. Kate answered with practiced composure, her voice steady as she confirmed the arrangements that had been made. When she hung up, she looked at William with tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "It's time," she said simply. "The doctors say we should gather the family." William nodded, understanding the gravity of what lay ahead. They had prepared for this moment, but no amount of preparation could truly ready them for the emotional journey they were about to undertake. Together, they would face this farewell with the strength and grace that had defined their partnership from the very beginning. As they prepared to leave the study, Kate paused to straighten William's tie, a small gesture that spoke volumes about their relationship. In the coming days, they would need to be strong not just for themselves, but for their children, their family, and their nation. The farewell they were about to witness would mark the end of an era and the beginning of their own chapter in the long history of the British monarchy. The drive to Balmoral Castle felt longer than usual, despite the familiar Scottish countryside rolling past their windows. William gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white against the leather. Kate sat beside him, occasionally glancing back at their 3 children who had fallen unusually quiet during the journey. George, now old enough to sense the gravity of the situation, stared out at the heather-covered hills with a maturity beyond his years. Charlotte clutched her favorite stuffed animal while little Louis dozed peacefully in his car seat, blissfully unaware of the significance of this trip. "Papa, will Great-Granny be okay?" Charlotte's small voice broke the silence that had settled over the car like a thick blanket. William caught his daughter's eyes in the rearview mirror, his heart breaking at the innocent hope he saw there. "We're going to see her now, sweetheart. We're going to spend time with her and tell her how much we love her." Kate reached back to squeeze Charlotte's hand. "Sometimes the best thing we can do for people we love is to be with them, even when things are difficult." The castle came into view as they rounded the final bend, its ancient stones standing proud against the dramatic Scottish sky. Staff members waited respectfully at the entrance, their faces reflecting the solemnity of the occasion. William parked the car and took a deep breath, knowing that once they walked through those doors, everything would change. Inside, the castle felt different somehow. The usual bustle of activity had been replaced by a hushed reverence. Family members had already begun arriving from around the world. Prince Charles looked older than William had ever seen him, the weight of impending responsibility etched deeply in the lines around his eyes. "She's been asking for you," Charles said quietly, embracing his son. "She wants to see the children." Kate helped the children out of their traveling clothes while William spoke with the doctors. The medical team explained the situation with professional compassion, preparing the family for what they might expect in the coming hours. Every word felt heavy with meaning, each update a reminder of how precious time had become. When they were finally ready, the family walked slowly down the familiar corridor toward the Queen's private apartments. The paintings on the walls seemed to watch their progress, centuries of royal history bearing witness to another chapter in the ongoing story of the monarchy. The Queen was propped up in her favorite chair by the window, looking out at the gardens she had tended for so many years. Despite her frailty, her eyes remained sharp and alert. When she saw William and Kate approaching with the children, a gentle smile crossed her face. "My dear ones," she said softly, her voice carrying the warmth that had always made her grandchildren feel special. "Come here to me." The children approached carefully, uncertain but drawn by their great-grandmother's familiar presence. George stood tall, trying to be brave for his younger siblings. Charlotte climbed carefully onto the Queen's lap, while Louis toddled over to examine the flowers on the side table. Kate felt tears spring to her eyes as she watched this tender scene unfold. This woman had been a constant source of strength and wisdom throughout their marriage, offering guidance with a gentle hand and unconditional love. Now, as they faced this inevitable farewell, Kate knew they were witnessing something truly precious. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows as the Queen spent precious moments with each of her great-grandchildren. Her voice, though weakened by age and illness, carried the same gentle authority that had guided the nation for decades. "George, my darling boy," she said, taking his small hand in her weathered one, "you must always remember to be kind to others, especially those who cannot help themselves. A true leader serves his people with humility and compassion." George nodded solemnly, absorbing every word. Even at his young age, he understood that his great-grandmother was sharing something important with him. "I promise, Great-Granny, I'll try to be as good as you." The Queen's eyes sparkled with tears and pride. "You already are, my sweet child. You already are." Charlotte, still curled up beside her great-grandmother, played with the pearl necklace that had become such an iconic part of the Queen's appearance. "Will you always watch over us, Great-Granny?" she asked with the directness that only children possess. "Always, my precious girl. Even when you cannot see me, I will be there in every sunset, every flower that blooms in the garden, every moment of joy you experience. Love never truly leaves us." Kate wiped away tears as she watched this extraordinary woman impart final wisdom to her children. William stood nearby, his own eyes glistening with unshed emotion. They both knew they were witnessing something that would stay with their children forever. As the day wore on, other family members took turns spending time with the Queen. Prince Charles sat beside his mother, holding her hand while they spoke quietly about the future of the monarchy. Princess Anne, ever practical, discussed the arrangements that would need to be made. Prince Andrew and Prince Edward shared memories of their childhood, bringing gentle smiles to their mother's face. The Queen asked specifically to speak with William and Kate alone as evening approached. The couple sat on either side of her chair, creating an intimate circle of conversation away from the others. "You two have been my greatest joy in these later years," she began, her voice carrying the weight of deep affection. "William, you have grown into the man I always knew you could become. Kate, you have brought such strength and grace to our family." Kate reached for the Queen's hand. "You've taught me everything about what it means to serve others. I promise we'll honor that legacy. The road ahead will not always be easy," the Queen continued, her gaze moving between them. "There will be times when the weight of responsibility feels overwhelming. But you have each other, and that makes all the difference." William leaned forward, his voice thick with emotion. "Grandmother, we're not ready to do this without you." "Oh, my dear boy," she replied with a gentle laugh that reminded them both of happier times. "You've been ready for years. You just haven't realized it yet. Trust in each other. Trust in the love you share. And remember that the crown is not a burden when it's carried with compassion." Outside, the Scottish twilight began to paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. The Queen looked toward the window, her expression peaceful. "I've lived a long and blessed life. I've seen this great nation through times of joy and sorrow, celebration and challenge. But the greatest blessing has been watching my family grow and flourish." She turned back to William and Kate, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of love and dedication. "Promise me that you'll take care of each other, and that you'll help the children understand that duty and love are not opposites, but partners in creating something beautiful." Both William and Kate nodded, their hearts full of love and determination. They understood that this conversation was more than a farewell. It was a passing of the torch, a sacred trust being placed in their hands. The night hours passed slowly, with family members taking turns sitting vigil beside the Queen's bedside. Kate had volunteered for the early morning shift, settling into the comfortable chair beside the bed with a cup of tea and a book of poetry that had belonged to her grandmother. In the quiet darkness, she could hear the Queen's gentle breathing, steady and peaceful. Occasionally, the older woman would stir, and Kate would lean forward to offer water or simply hold her hand. These intimate moments felt sacred, stripped of all royal protocol and filled only with human compassion. "Kate, dear," the Queen whispered during one of these wakeful moments. "Are you there?" "I'm here," Kate replied softly, moving closer. "Is there anything you need?" "Just your company," the Queen smiled weakly. "Tell me about the children. What are they dreaming of becoming?" Kate's face lit up as she spoke about George's fascination with helicopters like his father's, Charlotte's love for horses and drawing, and Louis's endless energy and curiosity about everything around him. The Queen listened with the same attentiveness she had shown to matters of state, finding joy in these simple family stories. "They're so lucky to have you as their mother," the Queen said. "You've given them something I always wished I could have provided more of for my own children." "What's that?" Kate asked gently. "The gift of a normal childhood despite extraordinary circumstances. You've found the perfect balance between preparing them for their future roles and letting them simply be children." As dawn approached, William quietly entered the room to relieve Kate. He kissed his wife softly and took her place beside his grandmother's bed. The Queen reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I've been thinking about your mother," she said, her voice carrying across the years. "Diana would be so proud of the man you've become and the family you've built." William felt his breath catch in his throat. The Queen rarely spoke about Diana, making this mention all the more meaningful. "I wish she could have known Kate and the children. Oh, my dear boy, but she does know them. Love transcends everything, even death. Your mother's spirit lives on in the kindness you show others, in the way you protect your family, in every charitable cause you champion." The morning light began to filter through the curtains, casting a golden glow across the room. Prince Charles appeared in the doorway and William nodded, understanding that it was time for the father and son to share these precious final moments with their matriarch. Kate gathered the children for breakfast in the castle's informal dining room, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy despite the circumstances. George ate quietly, occasionally asking questions about what was happening. Charlotte drew pictures to give to Great-Granny, while Louis played contentedly with his toy cars. "Mummy," Charlotte said, looking up from her drawing, "will Great-Granny go to heaven soon?" Kate sat down beside her daughter, choosing her words carefully. "Great-Granny has lived a very long and beautiful life, sweetheart. When people get older, sometimes their bodies get tired and they need to rest." "Will it hurt?" George asked with genuine concern. "No, darling. When someone is surrounded by so much love like Great-Granny is right now, it's peaceful. It's like going to sleep when you're very, very tired after a wonderful day." The children seemed to accept this explanation, returning to their breakfast with the resilience that Kate had always admired in them. She knew that this experience, difficult as it was, would teach them important lessons about love, loss, and the continuity of family bonds. Later that morning, the entire family gathered in the Queen's room. She was awake and alert, her eyes moving lovingly from face to face as if memorizing each one. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren surrounded her bed, creating a circle of love that seemed to fill the room with warmth and light. The Queen's final afternoon was filled with music and gentle conversation. Someone had brought in a small radio, and the soft melodies of her favorite classical pieces drifted through the room. Her beloved corgis lay quietly at the foot of her bed, as if they too understood the significance of the moment. Prince Philip's photograph sat prominently on the bedside table, and the Queen's eyes often wandered to it with the expression of deep longing and love. "I'll see him again soon," she whispered to Kate during one quiet moment. "We promised each other we'd never really be apart." Kate squeezed her hand gently. "He's waiting for you." "Yes," the Queen smiled peacefully. "He's probably complaining about how long I'm taking." The gentle humor that had sustained the Queen through decades of public service remained with her even now, bringing small smiles to the faces of her grieving family. William sat on one side of the bed while Charles occupied a chair on the other, both men finding comfort in being close to the woman who had shaped their entire lives. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, the Queen asked for her grandchildren and great-grandchildren to come closer. Her voice was growing weaker, but her message was clear and strong. "I want each of you to remember this," she said, looking at each young face in turn. "The love we share as a family is the most important thing you will ever possess. It's more valuable than any crown, more precious than any jewel, more powerful than any earthly authority." Harry, who had traveled from California to be present for this moment, held his grandmother's hand with tears streaming down his face. Despite the difficulties and distances that had separated parts of the family, this moment transcended all of that. Here there was only love and forgiveness. "Promise me," the Queen continued, her gaze encompassing all her descendants, "that you will take care of each other, that you will remember what it means to serve others with humility and compassion, that you will never let the duties of your positions overshadow the importance of being good human beings." The children nodded solemnly, while the adults whispered their promises through tears. Charlotte climbed carefully onto the bed and curled up beside her great-grandmother, her small hand resting on the Queen's arm. "I love you, Great-Granny," she said simply, "and I love you, my precious girl, more than all the stars in the sky." As evening approached, the Queen's breathing became more labored, but her expression remained peaceful. The family maintained their quiet vigil, sharing stories, singing softly, and simply being present with the woman who had been the steady center of their lives for so many years. William found himself thinking about all the lessons his grandmother had taught him, not through grand speeches but through her daily example, her unwavering commitment to duty, her genuine care for others, her ability to find joy in simple pleasures, and her deep understanding of what it meant to serve something greater than oneself. Kate watched her children processing this profound experience and felt grateful that they were witnessing such a peaceful, love-filled farewell. This would shape their understanding of death and dying for the rest of their lives, showing them that the end of life could be as beautiful and meaningful as its beginning. The Queen's doctor checked on her regularly, but stayed in the background, allowing the family these precious final hours together. There was nothing more that medicine could do. This was now about love, comfort, and the natural conclusion of a life well lived. As the Scottish stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the Queen opened her eyes one final time and looked around at all the faces surrounding her bed. Her lips moved slightly, and those closest to her could just make out her words, "Thank you for a beautiful life." The Queen passed away peacefully just as the last light of day faded from the Scottish sky. Her family surrounded her with love, their hands touching hers, their voices soft with final words of devotion and gratitude. In that sacred moment there was no protocol, no ceremony, just a family saying goodbye to the woman who had been their anchor for so many years. William felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders as he realized that the woman who had guided the nation for 7 decades was gone. But alongside that weight came a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had departed surrounded by love and that her legacy would continue through the values she had instilled in all of them. Kate gathered the children close, helping them understand that their great-grandmother was no longer suffering, that she was at peace. George stood tall, already sensing that his role in the family had shifted. Charlotte cried quietly, while Louis seemed to understand that something important had happened, even if he couldn't fully grasp its meaning. In the hours that followed, the family worked together to honor the Queen's wishes and begin the process of sharing the news with the world. Charles, now king, displayed the same quiet dignity his mother had modeled throughout her reign. William and Kate supported him and each other, drawing strength from their partnership and their shared memories of the remarkable woman they had lost. The children were allowed to spend a few quiet moments saying their final goodbyes before being taken to a separate part of the castle. Kate tucked them into bed with extra hugs and gentle reassurances, promising that their great-grandmother would always be with them in their hearts. "Will we see her again?" Charlotte asked as Kate pulled the covers up to her chin. "Someday, sweetheart. But for now, we carry her love with us everywhere we go. Every time you're kind to someone, every time you help others, you're honoring her memory." As the castle settled into the quiet of night, William and Kate found themselves alone for the first time since the Queen's passing. They held each other close, sharing their grief and their gratitude for having been part of such an extraordinary woman's life. She was ready, Kate said softly. She'd said everything she needed to say, given us everything we needed to move forward. William nodded, thinking about the private conversation he'd had with his grandmother just days before. She had spoken about the future with such confidence in him and Kate, such faith in their ability to serve the crown and their family with honor. The next morning brought the formal protocols and public announcements, but it also brought something else, a sense of continuity and hope. The Queen's death marked the end of an era, but it also represented the beginning of a new chapter in the monarchy's long history. William and Kate faced the cameras with composure and grace, their words carefully chosen to honor the Queen's memory while expressing their own grief. But it was their actions in the days that followed that truly demonstrated how well they had learned from her example. They made sure their children understood that grieving was natural and healthy, while also helping them find ways to celebrate their great-grandmother's incredible life. They visited local charities and community organizations, continuing the Queen's tradition of service even in their time of mourning. Months later, as they looked back on that difficult time at Balmoral, William and Kate realized that their farewell to the Queen had not been an ending, but a transformation. Her physical presence was gone, but her influence remained strong in every decision they made, every kindness they showed, and every moment they chose love over fear. The children still spoke about Great-Granny often, sharing memories and asking questions that showed how deeply her brief time with them had impacted their young lives. In those conversations, William and Kate could see the Queen's legacy continuing into the next generation, carried forward by children who had been blessed to know such an extraordinary woman. The graceful farewell they had shared was indeed steeped in emotion, but it was also filled with love, gratitude, and hope for the future. The Queen's final gift to her family had been showing them how to say goodbye with dignity and how to carry forward the best of what she had given them.